The elder sister was a female physician. After treating the imperial consort, she was praised by the emperor as having a magical touch. The imperial consort, overcome with jealousy, cut off her elder sister's hands and said with a smile, "I've heard that Dr. Song's medical skills are second to none, so why don't you go ahead and heal your own severed hands?" She refused to give her older sister water or medicine, and watched as her older sister died in agony. 6 years later, the imperial consort contracted a mysterious illness that tormented her terribly. I stepped forward and reported, "There is a man in this world who can cure this illness." The imperial consort's eyes lit up with hope. "Quickly, send for the divine physician, I'll pay whatever it takes." I shook my head regretfully. 6 years ago, Her Majesty killed her with her own hands. A remarkable event took place today at Wanchun Palace. The imperial consort sprained her ankle while practicing a dance. Inside the bedchamber, the imperial consort lay on her couch. Her personal maid was about to apply medicine to her, but the consort kicked her away. What good is applying medicine? The maid winced in pain but dared not say much. She could only try to persuade her gently. "Your Highness, the imperial physician said that if you apply this medicine for 7 days, the injury will heal." The imperial consort snapped. 7 days. What good will it do if my injury heals in 7 days? All the effort I've put into choreographing the dance these past few days will have been for nothing. The more she spoke, the angrier she became. She picked up the jade bottle beside her and hurled it at the palace maid. A crisp sound of shattering filled the room, and everyone fell silent. Everyone knew why the imperial consort was so distressed. The day after tomorrow is the emperor's birthday banquet. The imperial consort has been rehearsing a dance for 3 months in preparation, eager to dazzle everyone at the palace banquet. However, her ankle is now severely swollen, and the pain is so intense that she can't even walk, let alone dance. 3 months of hard work are about to go to waste. The palace attendants were all focused on figuring out how to appease the imperial consort's anger. And no one noticed that I had already approached her side, carrying a basin of water for her to wash her feet. I'm a young palace maid who's been here for less than half a month. Washing the imperial consort's feet is a grueling task. The more senior palace maids didn't want to do it, so they passed it on to me. At that moment, I knelt before the imperial consort as I always did, and before anyone could stop me, I had already clumsily grasped her ankle and placed it in the wooden tub filled with hot water. The head maid standing nearby looked down and saw what I was doing. She was so startled that she immediately shouted, "You fool! Her Majesty's foot is already injured, what are you doing?" She was prepared for the imperial consort to scream and demand that I be beaten to death. But he found that the imperial consort didn't say a word. Instead, she looked quite content. She looked down at the wooden tub in surprise and saw many fresh flower petals floating inside. "What kind of medicine is this?" she murmured. "It actually stopped hurting after just one soak." I quickly replied, "My father used to be an itinerant doctor. This is a family remedy passed down through the generations." The imperial consort was quite pleased. Her 2 willow-like eyebrows relaxed, and she said softly, "For a new palace maid like you, you actually have some skill." After helping the imperial consort finish her foot bath, I offered to massage her injured area. The injury used to hurt at the slightest touch, but now I could barely feel anything when I pressed on it, so I massaged it vigorously. After just a moment, most of the bruising had faded. The imperial consort was overjoyed. Now she would be able to dance again. Sure enough, at the palace banquet the next day, the imperial consort danced in the center of the lotus pond. As her sleeves fluttered and her skirt billowed, she looked just like a fairy descended from heaven. It certainly stole the show. The emperor, overcome with passion, immediately picked up the imperial consort in his arms and carried her to the palace of 10,000 springs. The smooth hot spring water washes away the cream of the skin. From then on, the emperor no longer attended court early in the morning. After a night of intimacy, the imperial consort was clearly in good spirits when she got out of bed. Her personal maid helped her get ready, and she called me over. "New guy, what's your name?" "I am Lu Ying." The imperial consort nodded and adjusted the golden hairpin the emperor had just bestowed upon her. "Firefly, I really owe you a debt of gratitude this time." I wouldn't dare. I bowed my head respectfully, and at the same time, my gaze fell upon the imperial consort's ankles. That ankle looks like it's completely healed. But then again, the herbs I put in my foot bath weren't actually meant to treat an illness. They were meant to numb the meridians. So after soaking, the pain goes away, the bruising on the skin and flesh fades, and the swelling does indeed subside. But the bone was actually dislocated. The misalignment is so slight right now that it's practically imperceptible. But if this continues, the injury to this leg will get worse and worse. A doctor shouldn't do that. A compassionate doctor, whose guiding principle is to cure patients, would never suggest a treatment that only addresses the symptoms without addressing the root cause. Instead, he or she would strongly advise the patient to rest and refrain from any physical activity. What does that have to do with me? I'm not a doctor. I'm a drug manufacturer. My father is the head of the Imperial Medical Academy, and our family has produced master physicians for generations, dating back to my great-grandfather. But I'm a disgrace to my family. I have no interest in healing the sick or saving lives. I use that pile of herbs in the backyard every day to concoct all kinds of poisons. When the plague was spreading, I used poison to kill the rats. So for a while, my yard was littered with rat carcasses. To outsiders, it seemed really scary, and they all called me a freak. Only my older sister stood up for me. She said, with the plague rampant, preventing its spread is just as important as treating those who are infected. Ion poisoning all the rats has also been a great service. She was 17 at the time and was already a renowned female physician. She had saved countless lives during the plague and was therefore held in very high esteem. But some people still questioned her. Song Yi, your sister is using poison to kill rats now, she'll use it to kill people someday. The older sister shook her head. Ayun wouldn't use medicine to poison anyone. She added, medicinal herbs are simply plants that grow under the sun and rain. They can be medicine, but they can also be poison. It all depends on whether a person's heart is good or evil. Besides, no matter how potent a poison Ayun creates, I can always make an antidote for it. So no one questioned it anymore, because everyone knew that Big Sister was a skilled doctor with a kind heart. No matter what trouble I got into, she was always there to bail me out. My older sister is 5 years older than me, and I've never been able to measure up to her. I used to defiantly concoct all sorts of strange and bizarre poisons, hoping to leave my older sister at a loss, but she simply smiled, and within just a few days, she had concocted the antidote. I had no choice but to keep conceding defeat. At the age of 19, my older sister completed her apprenticeship, gained a reputation that surpassed even her father's, officially took over the family legacy, and began taking the pulse of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. That same year, I grew tired of the perpetually bleak and stifling atmosphere in the capital, so I packed a small bag and took off. Actually, I ran away on my own, but everyone was saying I eloped with some stranger. My older sister caught up with me on a fast horse, and just as I thought she was going to take me back, she handed me a package containing a heavy load of cash and silver notes. That was my older sister's entire savings. With tears streaming down her face, she turned and mounted her horse again. Ah Yoon, go and see the free and open landscapes beyond the capital for your elder sister. It was then that I vaguely realized that my older sister, too, longed for freedom, but she is the eldest daughter in our family, so she must shoulder that responsibility, and so she spent her youth within the high palace walls, fulfilling her duties as a court physician. Big Sister did a great job. At that time, the imperial consort was injured while accompanying the emperor on a hunting trip, and the wound became infected. The older sister, undeterred by the filth or the hard work, drew out the pus and blood from the imperial consort's wound and treated it. In just over a month, the imperial consort's wound had healed, and her skin was as smooth as ever, without even the slightest scar. The emperor was also delighted, and when he came to visit the imperial consort, he praised her, saying, "People say that doctors have the power to bring the dead back to life, and the Song Dynasty female physician certainly had a pair of miraculous hands." As he said this, his gaze fell on his sister's hand, My older sister really does have a pair of very beautiful hands. Her wrists were as white as jade, her fingers as slender as spring green onions. As she held the medicine bowl in her hands, its snow-white porcelain body filled with jet-black medicinal liquid, the sight was truly a delight to the eye. The smile on the imperial consort's lips suddenly faltered. After the emperor left, she called for her older sister again to take her pulse. As soon as the elder sister entered the palace of 10,000 springs, she was immediately pinned down by the eunuchs and palace maids. The imperial consort sat on the couch, her eyes filled with disgust. "You wretch," she said. "You're using the pretext of treating his illness. But in reality, you're looking for ways to seduce the emperor." Someone cut off her hand. With a flash of the blade, the older sister was struck down and passed out in pain. The imperial consort stared coldly at her elder sister lying on the ground, then curved her lips into a smile both beautiful and malicious. "Don't they all say that physician Song's medical skills are second to none? Then surely a minor ailment like a severed hand shouldn't be a problem for you. Then please, Dr. Song, cure yourself." The imperial consort locked the elder sister in a side hall, denying her both water and medicine. Within just a few hours, my older sister bled to death. The imperial consort immediately feigned shock and reported to the emperor that the female physician Song had attempted to poison her while taking her pulse, and that her palace attendant had cut off the physician's hand in a moment of panic. The emperor had always favored the imperial consort above all others. When she wept so bitterly that her tears seemed to fall like rain on pear blossoms, the emperor, in a fit of rage, ordered the execution of hundreds of members of the Song family, from the head to the lowest. The only survivor was the youngest daughter, who had run away a few months earlier and whose whereabouts were unknown. By the time the news reached me, I had already arrived at the ferry landing. I was just one step away from seeing the scenic landscape of freedom my older sister had been longing for. The boatman asked me, "Miss, aren't you coming?" I remained silent for a long time, then set the letter on fire with a fire starter, and the ashes fell into the lake. I said, "I'm not leaving." 6 months later, I entered the palace and took the name Lu Ying. "Big sis, I don't want my freedom anymore. The only one who could cure my poison is gone. Then there will be no one in this world who can stop me." The imperial consort was extremely favored. She was the emperor's childhood sweetheart, when he was still the 5th prince, who had not yet gained the emperor's favor. The imperial consort rallied the influence of her entire clan behind him and helped him succeed in his bid for the throne. This act of kindness was more than enough for the emperor to be grateful for. Not to mention that the imperial consort possessed peerless beauty. Her every gesture and smile were as beautiful as a celestial being. Consequently, ever since the emperor ascended the throne, the imperial consort has been the object of his undivided affection. As soon as she gives birth to a prince, she will be crowned empress. Even though she is currently only a consort, she effectively holds the power to govern the 6 palaces. The fates of all the women within these palace walls lie in her hands. At that moment, the imperial consort lifted my chin with her long nail, her vermilion lips curving upward like poisonous petals. "Lu Ying, would you like to stay and work for me in the imperial harem?" Choosing the right master is of the utmost importance. When the master is in favor, the servants naturally rise to prominence as well. Not to mention becoming a personal maid to a consort in the palace. That's practically like being a mistress in her own right. So I quickly nodded, my eyes brimming with anticipation. The imperial consort had long anticipated that I would react this way, and her smile grew even broader. She gripped my chin, her fingernails digging into my skin. I flinched in pain, but didn't dare make a sound. The imperial consort said in a sinister tone, "But Lu Ying, you're just too beautiful, I can't help but worry. Let's do it this way." The imperial consort casually plucked a hairpin from her personal maid's hair and tossed it to me. "If you scar your face, I'll feel comfortable letting you serve me as a personal attendant." I looked up and stared at the hairpin, trembling all over. "Oh, are you too scared?" The imperial consort shook her head regretfully. "Never mind. Then, cleaning the chamber pot in the lavatory is a good job anyway. Firefly, what do you think?" I remained silent. The imperial consort stood up, not bothering to look at me anymore. Just as she was about to turn and walk away, I suddenly grabbed the hairpin and slashed it hard across my face. Fresh blood flowed down, dripping onto the ground and forming a dark red stream. The imperial consort turned her head and glanced at my face, then smiled with satisfaction. Very well, Lu Ying. You have not disappointed me. From now on, you will serve me personally. Serving the imperial consort closely is no easy task. In the rear courtyard of her palace, she had a massive pit 5 zhang deep dug, modeled after the torture methods of previous dynasties, and called it the Scorpion Pit. There are several thousand snakes kept in the snake pit. If a palace maid violated the palace rules, she would be stripped naked and thrown into this deep pit. I've been at the imperial consort's palace for just over a month, and already 7 palace maids have been thrown into vipers' nests. Some of them had merely spoken out of turn in the emperor's presence. Others had simply worn brightly colored clothes. When the emperor returns, he will no longer see these palace maids. Only in the deep pit in the backyard were there now more white bones that had been gnawed away almost entirely by snakes. However, half a month later, misfortune struck me. The emperor came to the imperial consort's palace for a meal, and the imperial consort called me to serve the food. This is the kind of assignment where it's all too easy to go and never return. Many of the previous palace maids died doing this very job. I was careful and cautious as I bowed my head to serve the emperor his meal, my eyes fixed only on the tips of my chopsticks, doing my utmost to make myself invisible. Yet the emperor's gaze still fell upon me. The imperial consort noticed the emperor's gaze and smiled. She said boldly, Lu Ying, lift your face so the emperor can see you. I obediently looked up, and so the scar that ran across his face was exposed to the emperor's gaze. The emperor gasped. Out of the blue, how did this happen? The imperial consort leisurely picked up a piece of salted pigeon with her chopsticks and placed it on the emperor's plate. Lu Ying is still young. It's inevitable that children will run and play in the palace. I don't know how it happened, but somehow she ended up like this. The emperor frowned. Yen'er, is there really no one else in your palace? How could you allow such an unsightly servant to attend to you so closely? The imperial consort laughed and said, there are so many beauties in the palace, it's like seeing too many pretty kittens and puppies. When you occasionally come across an ugly one, it's actually a bit of a novelty. She said nothing more and continued her meal with the emperor, a smile playing on her lips. All the eunuchs and palace maids around me breathed a sigh of relief. Everyone knew that as long as I didn't say anything else at that moment, I'd have made it through this ordeal. However, I stepped forward of my own accord and placed the porcelain jar I had prepared on the table. The soup was supposed to be served individually, but I placed it only in front of the imperial consort and did not serve any to the emperor. Before the imperial consort could rebuke me, I immediately bowed and reported, Your Majesty, please forgive me. This is a medicinal dish I prepared specifically to treat the imperial consort's recent nightmares. I opened the porcelain bowl to find a bowl of brownish-red broth with a bitter, medicinal smell. The emperor paused for a moment and looked at the imperial consort. Have you been having nightmares a lot lately? While the imperial consort was momentarily taken aback, I was quick to report, the emperor hasn't been coming to the Wanchun Palace much lately. The imperial consort misses the emperor so much that her longing has made her ill, causing her to suffer from nightmares. The emperor looked at the imperial consort with concern. Why didn't you tell me? The imperial consort had already regained her composure. She immediately lowered her eyes, her gaze filled with pitiful sorrow. Your Majesty, I feared you had important matters to attend to, and I did not wish to cause you any further worry over me. The emperor had already risen and wrapped his arm around the imperial consort's fair, jade-like shoulder. Nothing is more important than you. Prior to this, the emperor, due to his heavy workload, had not set foot in the harem for many days. I'm just here for a meal this time. After dinner, I was planning to go straight to the imperial study to review the memorials. But that night, the emperor did not leave. Instead, he stayed with the imperial consort as she fell asleep and even personally fed her medicine. The next day, the emperor finally left, and the imperial consort, still in her nightgown, came before me so that I could help her put on her shoes. The tip of her Suzu-embroidered shoe lifted my chin, and the imperial consort lowered her eyes and smiled. What a fine girl, she's just my type. Even at such a young age. She already knows how to win the emperor's heart for me. She immediately turned her head and harshly scolded the other palace maids. Unlike these scheming vixen show claim to be loyal to me, but in reality, every single one of them is scheming to seduce the emperor. The rest of the palace maids trembled with fear and dared not look up. Only when the imperial consort was away would she secretly cast jealous glances my way. I pretended not to notice and simply served the imperial consort faithfully every day. After the nightmare, the imperial consort, having tasted the benefits, began to feign illness frequently. None of these are serious illnesses, just headaches, fevers, and colds. The emperor truly cared for her, so whenever the imperial consort complained of feeling unwell, he would immediately come to be by her side. So everyone knew that the emperor favored the imperial consort above all others and would even set aside state affairs for her sake. The imperial consort once again proved her standing in the emperor's heart and grew even more smug. I looked at her, radiant with the favor she had received, and silently sneered to myself. She shouldn't have pretended to be sick. The phrase my older sister says most often is, all medicine is a little toxic. Just as the imperial consort gained favor by feigning illness, she would naturally suffer the consequences of her deception. There were already people in the palace who were very dissatisfied with her. Sure enough, after paying her respects at the Empress Dowager's palace one day, the imperial consort was very upset. When she was alone, she smashed a piece of porcelain and said bitterly, "That old haggle she does is give me the cold shoulder every day. If it weren't for our Wei family helping her son rise to power, how could Shay concubine who'd fallen out of favor for so many years ever have become Empress Dowager?" I stepped forward at just the right moment and took the imperial consort's arm. "Your Highness, please don't get angry, don't let it harm your health." Paying respects was originally a gesture of courtesy from Her Highness to the Empress Dowager. In this servant's opinion, since the Empress Dowager fails to appreciate the gesture, Her Highness need not continue to show her such courtesy. Anyway, with heavy snowfall and cold weather this winter, Your Highness could claim that an old ailment has flared up, making it impossible to pay respects. Let this servant go in my place. That way, we'll save the Empress Dowager from losing face, and she won't be able to find fault with Your Highness. The imperial consort let go of her worries and smiled brightly. "Lu Ying, you really are quick-witted." I lowered my eyes and said respectfully, "To ease Your Highness's worries." And so, I went alone to the Empress Dowager's palace. Since the emperor happened to be present as well, I reported to the Empress Dowager and the emperor that the imperial consort was ill. The emperor immediately came to the imperial consort's defense. "Mother, since her miscarriage years ago, Yenner's health has never been good, and she does tend to get sick easily in the winter." Tai Ho remained impassive, then nodded after a long pause. "It's cold out now, and coming all the way from Wanchen Palace is quite a hassle. In that case, I'll excuse the imperial consort from paying her respects." The emperor breathed a sigh of relief. However, the Empress Dowager suddenly looked up at me. "Has the imperial consort's health still been this poor lately?" I quickly embellished the story. In response to the Empress Dowager's question, "The imperial consort is indeed frail and often has to stay in bed." The Empress Dowager looked at the emperor. "Consort Wei is constantly falling ill. Her health is likely not good. Your Majesty, do you think she is capable of bearing an heir?" The emperor had been so preoccupied with worrying about the imperial consort that he was taken aback when the Empress Dowager suddenly reminded him of this. The Empress Dowager took a sip of hot tea and said calmly, "I know you favor her and wish to make her empress after she gives birth to the eldest legitimate son, but it's been several years now. If she still hasn't had a child, are you just going to keep waiting?" The emperor remained silent. Silence reigned inside the main hall. No one would notice me standing there with my hands at my sides. My expression was respectful, but inside I felt waves of intense pleasure washing over me. I know that the very thing the imperial consort hates most is also the thing I've been looking forward to the most. And it's finally coming. A month later, the imperial court held a selection of concubines. No one had discussed this matter with the imperial consort in advance. The Empress Dowager had probably anticipated that the imperial consort would cause a scene, so she kept the news strictly under wraps. By the time the imperial consort found out, the court ladies who were like flowers had already entered the palace. I was the one who broke the bad news to the imperial consort. Her face suddenly turned pale, and her first instinct was to grab the whip and lash out at me like a madwoman. "You shameless, wretched servant, how dare you deceive this princess? The emperor would never do such a thing. He would never treat me this way." My back was whipped until it bled profusely. Blood spattered onto the Empress Dowager's hands, but she was completely oblivious. The rest of the palace ladies stood silently by, watching. They knew that the imperial consort couldn't accept the truth and was taking her frustration out on innocent palace maids, but no one dared to stop him. There are even people who are jealous of me and would love to see me beaten to death right now. But I didn't get killed. After receiving several dozen lashes, the imperial consort, completely drained of strength, dropped the whip and fainted. He remained unconscious for several hours. The imperial consort's health wasn't this frail in the past, but she had feigned illness so many times before that the emperor would summon the imperial physician to examine her. So the imperial consort would have me prepare a few doses of medicine for her, just enough to make the physician believe she was actually ill. I have always worked diligently to help the imperial consort feign illness. As a result, after often feigning illness, the imperial consort actually fell ill. When she woke up, the imperial consort was burning up with fever. Moaning, she said she had never felt so unwell and ordered someone to go quickly and summon the emperor. With my back covered in whip marks, I felt not a shred of resentment and immediately ran loyally out the gate of the Wanchen Palace. Half an hour later, I finally returned and wept before the imperial consort, who had been waiting anxiously. This servant was unable to see His Majesty was bestowing his favor on the new concubine. As soon as the imperial consort heard this, she fainted once again. The imperial physician came to take her pulse and concluded that the imperial consort was indeed very ill this time. I went to Houching Hall again, and this time I finally got to see the emperor. "Your Majesty, the imperial consort is ill and wishes to see you." The emperor had been listening to the newly arrived consort Jiang play the zither. Upon hearing this, consort Jiang, with a charming smile, urged the emperor, "The imperial consort is ill. Your Majesty, please go see her." However, the emperor had already received countless such reports before, and he simply waved his hand. That's just Yenner's way of acting cute to win his favor. Jiang Jiyu glanced at my expression and covered her mouth, saying, "But this time, it looks worse than usual." The emperor smiled as he pulled consort Jiang into his arms. "Of course it's serious. Yenner is jealous because she sees how much I dote on you." Consort Jiang Jiyu smiled as she playfully tapped the emperor on the shoulder. She was very young, yet she had already blossomed into a stunning beauty. The emperor and consort Wei had known each other since their youth, and consort Jiang bore a striking resemblance to the 16-year-old Wei Yenner. Because of this resemblance, the emperor was very indulgent toward consort Jiang. After all, Jiang Jieyu was still young and, as the minister's legitimate daughter, she soon became arrogant because of the favor she received. Half a month later, the imperial consort was feeling better. Leaning on my arm, she took a stroll in the imperial garden to clear her mind, and we ran into Lady Jiang and several other new court ladies. Jiang Jieyu gave a half-hearted bow and stepped forward, with the new and former lovers standing side by side. The contrast was rather stark. Jiang Jieyu was dressed in her finest, radiant as peach and plum blossoms. The imperial consort, having just recovered from a serious illness, looked pale and ashen. So consort Jiang smiled and said, "When I first entered the palace, everyone said I resembled the imperial consort. At the time, I took those words as a compliment. But now that I've seen Her Majesty with my own eyes, I feel I'd rather do without that compliment." The imperial consort was furious. I stood there, feeling disappointed as well. I had originally planned to find an ally among this group of newcomers and make her a rival to the imperial consort. Jiang Jieyu was the most promising among this group of new recruits. She was beautiful and came from a noble family, and was granted the title of Jieyu as soon as she entered the palace. The Jiang family's influence was not much less than that of the Wei family. Jiang Jieyu was originally a candidate who could have competed with the imperial consort for the title of empress. But she's so stupid after just a few days of being indulged by the emperor. She's already become so arrogant. I sighed silently to myself. It's ruined. Sure enough. Even though the imperial consort had been ill for so many days, she still held the authority to oversee the 6 palaces, on the grounds of flouting palace regulations and showing disrespect to her superiors. She had Jiang Jieyu sent to the office of punishment to receive a caning. The other newcomers were also implicated and were all sent to the Buddhist hall to kneel as punishment for 12 hours. Even so, when the imperial consort returned to the palace, she was still seething with anger. Back then, the emperor said we'd be together for a lifetime. Just the two of yous, and now the bride is practically stepping on my face. The imperial consort was so angry that she felt a tight, aching pain in her chest. So I quickly brought her some tea to help her calm down. This servant knows your highness is angry, but since your highness has severely punished all the newly arrived concubines, the emperor is bound to ask about it later. The imperial consort smashed the teacup. They were the ones who were rude first. Yes, but in the emperor's presence, your highness should be gentle rather than firm. So, when the emperor arrived at the Wanchen palace with a stern expression, what he saw was a most pitiable imperial consort. Her shirt was half unbuttoned, revealing a sliver of her shoulder, and on her fair skin, an old scar stood out starkly. The imperial consort looked up and forced a smile. It's raining, and this wound is aching, so I'll have Lu Ying apply some ointment to ease the pain. With gentle hands, I applied the ointment to the scar on the imperial consort's shoulder. This scar dates back to the time when the imperial consort accompanied the emperor in his struggle for the throne. Fighting their way into the palace, a stray arrow was fired at them, and the imperial consort shielded the emperor from it. Jiang Jieyu was thinking too simplistically. The emperor has favored the imperial consort so much over the years, it can't possibly be just because of her beauty. She was indeed the woman he had once loved deeply. Back then, during the struggle for the throne, the young man and the young woman had each risked their lives for the other. Therefore, while the emperor might seek novelty and favor other women, deep down, it is unlikely that any woman could replace Wei Yan'er in his heart. That night, the emperor personally applied ointment to the imperial consort and chatted with her about amusing incidents from their youth. The matter of her harsh punishment of the palace concubines was thus quietly swept under the rug. Over the next half-month, the emperor stayed at Wanchen Palace every night, neglecting his other concubines. The imperial consort was very pleased with herself. Her complexion had become even smoother and more radiant as she continued to enjoy the emperor's favor. I used fresh rose juice to bathe her, and when I got to her fingers, she suddenly shuddered. I quickly knelt down. Please forgive me, your highness, but I have a wound here, the imperial consort asked in puzzlement. Where was this drawn? How come I didn't notice it, since it was just a tiny scratch? The imperial consort didn't give it a second thought and turned back to happily look forward to the emperor's arrival. I stared at her coldly, a malicious smile playing on my lips. When I was a child, I once told my older sister that I wanted to develop a heart-piercing poison. At first, this poison shows no signs of its presence, but as soon as a person's mood takes a turn for the worse, its toxicity intensifies, causing the body to rot away little by little. My older sister patted me on the head and said, "How deep must your grudge be for you to use a poison like this?" While big sister was still alive, I hadn't developed the heart-piercing poison. After her death, I finally realized just how deep a grudge it takes to create a poison like that. The imperial consort is very happy right now, so the poison lurking within her body is only mildly toxic. It has caused nothing more than the small wound on her fingertip. So, what if she were to fall from the clouds and sink into the mud? By then, how much of her body would the poison have already corroded? At that thought, I was so excited I could hardly contain myself. I quietly went to the Buddhist chapel, with the exception of consort Jiang. The other concubines were all kneeling here as punishment. They complained constantly, sometimes saying that consort Jiang had dragged them down, and other times complaining about the cruelty of imperial consort Wei. Only one woman, kneeling in the path of the wind, warned them. Walls have ears in the palace. Please be careful what you say. Sisters. Her words immediately drew a barrage of criticism. Isn't it your sister's fault that we got punished? You're just a concubine's daughter who knows what underhanded tricks you used to get into the palace, and yet here you are, lecturing us. So the woman said no more. She simply knelt before the Buddha statue, closed her eyes, and recited sutras. From where I stood, all I could see was her profile, stoically enduring the darkness. I recognized her. She was Jiang Kairan, the half-sister of Jiang Jieyu. Although she, too, came from the Jiang family, consort Jiang had always been looked down upon by the other concubines. Her biological mother had been merely a dancer who died at a young age, and her elder half-sister, Lady Jiang, had always treated her harshly. I thought for a moment, then stepped out of the shadows. Someone recognized me and said, with a hint of sarcasm, "Oh, isn't this Auntie Lu Ying? The imperial consort's right-hand woman. Is Auntie here to laugh at us?" I said nothing, but looked at Jiang, the court lady, as she recited the sutras. Despite being forced to kneel for so long, you seem very calm. The other concubines assumed I was taking my anger out on Jiang Kairan simply because she was Jiang Jiyu's younger sister, so they all stood by to watch the show. Upon hearing this, Lady Jiang opened her eyes and said in a low, measured voice, "There must be many upheavals within the palace. If things aren't calm now, what will we do in the future?" I looked at her intently. She wasn't exceptionally beautiful, but her looks were above average. She had a subtle, understated charm. Yet there was an indescribable allure about her. She was constantly bullied in the Jiang family, yet she managed to enter the palace despite being a concubine's daughter. She must have had some special talent. This young woman is sure to go far. With that in mind, I said quietly, "The scholar is kneeling in the draft. The cold is seeping into his body. It's not good for a woman." I looked at the others. Could the other young masters please make some room? The other concubines were taken aback. They had been tormenting Lady Jiang by deliberately assigning her the coldest spot, and now they were forced to give up a warm spot for her. Jiang Kairan was also taken aback. For the first time, a ripple of emotion appeared on her face, which was always as calm as still water. She didn't understand why I was helping her, but I had already turned and walked away. It's a lovely night. I've finally found my ally. In the days that followed, the imperial consort remained in favor, while Lady Jiang faded into obscurity after being caned by the Office of Punishment. But she didn't stay quiet for long. Soon after, when the imperial physician checked her pulse to ensure her well-being, he discovered that consort Jiang was pregnant. The news of this pregnancy sent shockwaves throughout the imperial palace. The emperor and the empress dowager rushed to the scene immediately, and the palace of consort Jiang, which had been quiet for several days, suddenly became a hive of activity. After carefully taking her pulse, the imperial physician reported to the emperor, due to the shock her mother experienced, followed by excessive worry. Consort Jiang's pregnancy is unstable and must be carefully protected. Upon hearing this, the empress dowager was already furious. Jiang Jieyu was pregnant when she received such a severe caning at the Office of Punishment. It's a miracle that she hasn't miscarried. Afterward, the emperor didn't even ask after her once. He stayed the night at Consort Wei's quarters every day. How could Lady Jiang not worry herself to death? With a look of shame on his face, the emperor immediately elevated Jiang Jieyu's rank, conferring upon her the title of second-rank Jiaoyi, and urged her to take good care of her pregnancy, assuring her that he would visit her every day. When the news reached the Wanchun Palace, the imperial consort was stunned for a long time. She gripped the armrests of the chaise longue so tightly that her knuckles turned pale from the strain. She had never felt so desperate. The imperial consort had been a consort even when the emperor was still the fifth prince. But after he ascended the throne, due to the empress dowager's insistence, she was granted only the title of imperial consort. One must give birth to an heir to the throne before being crowned empress. At first, the imperial consort wasn't in a hurry. After all, the emperor favored her above all others, so having a child was only a matter of time. However, now Jiang Jiaoyi has had a child before she did. Not to mention that, In the previous incident, it was clearly consort Jiang who had offended her first, which is why she punished her. Yet now, because of this child's existence, she has been turned into the villain who nearly killed the imperial heir. As a result, the emperor began to neglect her. That night, the imperial consort bit down on her quilt, crying out in pain over and over again, "Fireflies! Fireflies!" I rushed forward and said, "Your servant is here. My body hurts so much. It hurts so much." I immediately brought her some pain-relieving medicine, and after she drank it, she drifted off to sleep in my arms. The painkillers were very effective. So the imperial consort did not notice that the sores on her hand had spread from her fingertips all the way to her palm. She chopped off my older sister's hand, so her body also began to rot starting from her hand. That's fair. And that's just a fair start. The imperial consort was no ordinary woman. Having remained in favor for so many years, she naturally had her own ways of getting things done. Therefore, when consort Jiang was at the height of her influence, the imperial consort did not step forward to vie for the emperor's favor, but instead voluntarily retired to a Buddhist temple to pray for the emperor and the Suntoba-born prince. Even the emperor was deeply moved upon hearing this. The imperial consort had always been both stunningly beautiful and willful, so when she revealed such a gentle and tender side, she truly inspired sympathy. What's more, deep down, the emperor truly felt he had let the imperial consort down. He had promised the imperial consort that they would be together for the rest of their lives. And he had also promised that their child would be the eldest legitimate son and the future crown prince. Now that the vows have turned to ashes, the emperor truly has something to be ashamed of. So the emperor went to the Buddhist temple as well, by the light of a dim lamp. He saw a beautiful woman dressed in plain white burning incense and praying, first offering blessings for the little prince who was about to be born, and then suddenly breaking down in tears. "I hope that the child I lost many years ago will be reborn into my womb in the next life, so that I can continue to be his mother. My child, mother misses you so much. So much." The emperor was suddenly struck by a pang of sorrow. Many of the long-serving staff at the palace knew why the imperial consort, despite being the emperor's favorite for so many years, had been unable to bear children. She had once been pregnant, but at that time she was accompanying the emperor in the struggle for the throne. After being struck by an arrow, she miscarried. The imperial consort was severely weakened by this experience. The imperial physician advised that becoming pregnant again so soon could be harmful to her health, so she took fertility-suppressing medicine for quite some time and only stopped taking it last year, after her health had fully recovered. At that moment, the emperor strode forward and pulled the imperial consort into his arms. "Yener." The imperial consort wept uncontrollably in the emperor's arms. "Your Majesty, I really miss that child." With the past events still fresh in his mind, the emperor shed a tear. "Yener, don't worry, we'll have more children in the future. As long as you have a child, the position of Empress Dowager will still be yours, and our child will be the legitimate heir and the crown prince. You see, sister, it's actually quite difficult to get the imperial consort into trouble. She has so much capital that even if she's covered in mud, she can still get back on her feet. But as for me, I have plenty of patience." After the emperor and the imperial consort returned from the Buddhist temple together, their relationship grew increasingly close. And there's even better news to come. A month later, the imperial physician diagnosed that the imperial consort was pregnant. That day, the imperial consort wept with joy, and the emperor was also overjoyed. He couldn't help but exclaim, "For many years, there were no children in the palace. But now two have come in quick succession, truly a blessing bestowed upon me by heaven." The emperor had no idea that his offhand remark would give the imperial consort cause for concern. After the emperor left, the imperial consort finally let her long-suppressed displeasure show. "2 children," she muttered. "Can the bastard offspring of that whore really be called a blessing alongside my own children?" I said nothing, keeping a quiet watch on what was behind me out of the corner of my eye. Sure enough, one of the young palace maids' expression changed ever so slightly. That young palace maid was one of the Empress Dowager's people. The Empress Dowager had planted spies in the palaces of every concubine. I had actually figured out this young palace maid's true identity long ago. But instead of exposing her, I promoted her to serve tea and water to the imperial consort. I knew that the imperial consort's angry outburst that lowly woman and her worthless child are not worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as her own child would surely reach the Empress Dowager's ears. At night, I helped the imperial consort get ready for bed, and only then did I ask a palace maid I knew well to apply medicine to the wound on my back. Those were the whip marks inflicted by the imperial consort back then. They had never fully healed. Later, when the imperial consort was in a bad mood, she took her frustration out on me several times. The old wounds and new ones were all tangled together, and it looked truly horrific. The palace maid spoke up on my behalf. Auntie Luiying has served the imperial consort loyally for so many years. Yet the imperial consort doesn't treat you like a human being. Auntie has nothing to show for it but a body covered in wounds. I covered her mouth. Why are you saying all this? Realizing she had said something she shouldn't have, she lowered her head. I smiled and looked out the window at the gathering storm clouds. A change is coming. Sure enough, the weather changed. On a day when the rain was pouring down, Jiang Zhaoyi had a miscarriage. All the imperial physicians from the entire palace had gone there, and the Empress Dowager and the Emperor arrived at the same time. Shortly afterward, the imperial consort, who held the authority to oversee the 6 palaces, also arrived. After consulting with the imperial physicians, he came out to report. Consort Jiang has musk inside her body. In other words, her miscarriage wasn't an accident, someone caused it. The emperor was furious and ordered a thorough investigation. An hour later, Consort Jiang's bracelet was picked out from among the pile of items. The imperial physician examined it and found that this bracelet contained musk. And there's a story behind this bracelet. It had originally been a gift from the emperor to the imperial consort. When Jiang Jiyu first became pregnant, she saw it and liked it, so she asked the emperor for it. At that moment, the emperor was angry with the imperial consort for whipping Lady Jiang, so he immediately ordered the imperial consort to give the bracelet to Lady Jiang. At first, the imperial consort refused, but in the end she couldn't resist and finally gave the bracelet to Consort Jiang. Everything makes sense now. The imperial consort was the one who plotted to kill the heir to the throne. Naturally, she refused to admit it and wept bitterly before His Highness. Your Majesty, I swear on my family's honor that I have never touched such a thing as musk. She suddenly thought of something and glared angrily at me behind her. Was it you? Was it you who betrayed me? The imperial consort pointed at me and cried out to the emperor. Your Majesty, the bracelet was sent to me by Luiying. That girl is well versed in pharmacology. It must have been her who poisoned Consort Jiang. The Empress Dowager could no longer bear to listen and slammed her hand down on the table. She's just a palace maid. No one ordered her to do this. What reason would she have to harm Consort Jiang? Don't think I don't know. Wasn't it you, Imperial Consort Wei, who said back then that Consort Jiang's child was a bastard, unworthy of being born alongside your own? The imperial consort was struck as if by lightning and trembled uncontrollably. As for me, I simply knelt on the ground and bowed my head, repeatedly crying out that I was innocent. In the end, both the master and the servant were severely punished. Consort Wei was demoted to the rank of noble consort, had her annual salary reduced for 1 year, and was confined to her quarters to reflect on her wrongdoing. The palace maid Luiying was beaten to death with sticks. Your Highness, Your Highness, save me. I burst into tears and pleaded with the imperial consort for help. She had her hands full and didn't even glance at me. Amid the chaos, someone suddenly stepped forward from the crowd and knelt in the center of the hall. It was Jiang Kairen. She bowed her head toward the dais. Your Majesty and the Empress Dowager, please hear me out. At the time my elder sister took the bracelet, I happened to be in her chambers as well. I recall that the person who brought the bracelet was not Auntie Luiying. The imperial consort and I were both taken aback. The emperor said gravely, why are you bringing this up? Even if it wasn't a gift from Luiying. As a confidant of Consort Wei, she's naturally involved in this as well. Jiang Kairen replied with neither arrogance nor subservience. I understand. Your Majesty, both the Empress Dowager and the Emperor are furious right now. But we've already lost one child in the palace. We cannot afford to lose Lady Wei's current pregnancy as well. These words struck a nerve with the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. And they both fell silent. I have been praying for the children of the palace before the Buddha and have already transcribed 12 volumes of Buddhist scriptures. The Buddha said, "If you wish for peace, there must be no more bloodshed in the palace." After saying this, Lady Jiang had a palace maid bring forth the Buddhist sutras she had transcribed. Sure enough, there were exactly 12 volumes. The Empress Dowager, who was also a Buddhist, remained silent for a long time upon hearing this, and finally turned to the Emperor. "Let Lu Ying attend to Consort Wei for now. She's been her attendant for the past few years, and if Lu Ying were to die, Consort Wei's pregnancy might not go smoothly." The Emperor agreed and glanced at Consort Wei. Consort Wei looked at the Emperor with tears in her eyes. But in the end, the Emperor simply turned and walked away. The imperial consort was confined to her quarters, and no one in Wanchun Palace was allowed to come and go as they pleased. I was the only one who, because of my knowledge of pharmacology, was permitted to visit the Imperial Medical Academy on a regular basis to prepare pregnancy-preserving medicine for the imperial consort. The imperial consort was being especially careful during this pregnancy. I brewed medicine for her, and she always made sure I took the first sip. Actually, she's been doing this all these years. She always has me taste all her food and medicine first. And she has the imperial physicians thoroughly inspect all the items she uses. You could say they were very careful. So she didn't understand why her hands were getting worse and worse. It looked like frostbite, but it hurt far more than frostbite. At night, she was in so much pain she couldn't sleep. So she asked me to go to the Imperial Medical Academy to get some medicine. I ran into Lady Jiang at the Imperial Medical Academy's pharmacy. She seemed to have been waiting for me on purpose. She had dismissed the other palace attendants. And in that secluded side chamber, it was just the two of us. Her skin was pale, and in the sunlight, it had a sickly, bloodless beauty. "Auntie, you know it's Mui, don't you expose me?" "Yes. I know that the person who actually gave Consort Jiang the musk was Lady Jiang. She was actually being very careful. But to someone like Mu who's been brewing poison since I can remember, it was like trying to show off with an axe in front of Lu Ban." That day, in Consort Jiang's palace, I approached Lady Jiang quietly and told her that I knew it was her. In that instant, Jiang Siren's face suddenly turned deathly pale. But I didn't say a word right away. Even when the truth eventually came to light and the imperial consort and I were both kneeling in the hall, I still never said a word. Finally, she stepped in to save me. My hands were busy measuring out the medicine, and I didn't even look up. "I've done you no wrong, why would I expose you?" Jiang Qiren blurted out. "But after all, you are Wei Gui." Before she could finish speaking, she realized what was happening and let out a cry of surprise. "Do you have a grudge against the Wei family?" "Why?" I couldn't be bothered to explain, so I just yanked off half my shirt. The whip marks on his back, inflicted by Consort Wei, were a shocking sight. Jiang Qiren stared at my back in shock. After a long moment, she lowered her head and sighed softly. I said calmly, "Since I've already told you about my enemy, why don't you tell me about yours?" Jiang Qiren remained silent, then finally spoke in a low voice. "My mother was literally tortured to death by her back then." The she here refers to his elder half-sister, Jiang Zhaoyi. I'd always wanted to take revenge, but before I could make my plans, she was summoned to the palace for the imperial selection. If she's in the palace, I'll have no chance to take my revenge. So I had no choice but to follow him in. Those 12 volumes of Buddhist scriptures were not intended to pray for the prince's well-being at all. Rather, knowing full well the gravity of my sins, I was seeking forgiveness from the Buddha. After saying that, Lady Jiang looked at me. "Now that you hold something over me, you can do with me as you please." Without saying a word, I handed her the medicine I was holding. Jiang Qiren was taken aback. I said lazily, "This is a folk remedy that can help a woman get pregnant. I don't usually tell just anyone about it. Go give it to your elder sister to drink. She must be really craving it right now." Rest assured, even if you showed this prescription to the imperial physician, he would never be able to find anything wrong with it. But even good medicine shouldn't be taken in excess. Taking too much can kill you. Concubine Jiang gave me a deep look. She was as sharp as a tack and then bowed deeply. What can I do for my aunt? I smiled faintly and looked up at the sky outside the window. I used to think that if our loved ones were watching over us from heaven, they would surely want us to avenge them. But now I realize that maybe that's not the case. Maybe what they really want is for us to live well and be happy. Concubine Jiang, if your mother were still alive, I'm sure she would only want her daughter to be happy. Just like my older sister, Jiang Kairin, who had always projected a cold and aloof image, suddenly felt her eyes well up with tears. I looked at her. So, Lady Jiang, I have a question for you. Do you want to be queen? A month later, two major events took place. The first major development was that the imperial physician diagnosed that Wei Yin'er's current pregnancy was most likely a boy. The emperor was overjoyed. And even the Empress Dowager began to soften her stance. The Wei family immediately sent a petition requesting that their family members be allowed to visit him at the palace. The memorial subtly alluded to Wei Yin'er's past with the emperor, as well as the Wei family's role in helping him ascend the throne all those years ago. Amid this atmosphere, which was part nostalgia and part pressure, the emperor restored Wei Yin'er to her position as imperial consort. The second major event was the death of consort Jiang. There are many different theories about exactly how she died. One small detail is that her younger sister, Jiang Kairin, recently won the emperor's favor by performing a sword dance. This was a profound shock to consort Jiang, for after all, the mother of Lady Jiang was a lowly dancer. And Lady Jiang herself had won the emperor's favor by inheriting her mother's base skills. On top of that, Wei Yin'er had caused the death of her child had now become a consort of honor. So consort Jiang was naturally both anxious and distressed. Just at that critical moment, she noticed that the favored concubine Jiang was taking a dose of fertility medicine. Consort Jiang quickly snatched the prescription and followed the instructions to the letter, drinking the concoction for 7 consecutive days. Suddenly, he was struck by excruciating abdominal pain. And after suffering for several hours, he died. It is said that back then, Jiang Saren's mother was locked in the woodshed by the eldest daughter of the Jiang family just as she was about to give birth, and ultimately died during a difficult delivery. Now that Jiang Zhaoyi has also died of abdominal pain, it seems to carry a certain air of divine justice and inevitable retribution. However, these were just idle gossip among the palace maids. After all, the imperial physician had reviewed the prescription and found nothing wrong with it. Concubine Jiang continued to perform the sword dance for the emperor and remained in his favor. Combined with that fertility medicine, she soon became pregnant. With the Jiang family having lost its legitimate daughter, they had no choice but to stake everything on this remaining daughter born out of wedlock. As for the Empress Dowager, she naturally preferred consort Jiang who, like herself, was a devout Buddhist over the spoiled Wei Yin'er. And so, with support from all sides, Jiang Kairin continued to rise through the ranks and was soon conferred the title of consort de. After all these years, the first woman in the palace capable of standing on equal footing with the imperial consort has finally emerged. She did not possess the beauty of a consort, but aside from her looks, she had the support of her family, the imperial heir she carried in her womb, and, above all, a composure and wisdom that allowed her to remain unflappable in the face of adversity. The imperial consort was in the palace, whipping a palace maid to vent her anger. But this time, after only a few lashes, she collapsed onto the ground. I put on my clothes and, ignoring the blood streaming down my back, helped the imperial consort to her feet. Her hand was wrapped in thick bandages, and blood kept seeping through them. The wound has spread to his arm. I said slowly, "Your Highness, please don't be angry. The only reason consort Jiang has won the emperor's favor is because she knows how to perform the sword dance. I've heard, Your Highness, that you're also quite skilled at sword dancing." Consort Wei snorted coldly. "It's more than just a skill. That sword dance was actually created by this consort herself back in the day. This is the root of her resentment. She was the one who shared a tender romance with the emperor, and she was also the one who vowed to stand by him through life and death. Now that she is getting older, The emperor has begun to look for traces of her in the new concubines entering the palace. Why should that be? Yet she was the only one the emperor truly loved. I understood the imperial consort's distress, so I leaned close to her ear, partly to persuade her, partly to seduce her. I believe that when your highness performs the sword dance, it will be 10 times more beautiful than that of that impostor. Consort Jiang. 3 days later, Consort Wei began practicing her dance. Although she is pregnant, she is still in the early stages, so it doesn't affect her mobility. It's just that after living a life of luxury for so many years, my strength and flexibility are no longer what they used to be. Consort Wei was disheartened to discover that her sword dance was indeed no match for that of that wretch. Ms. Jiang, I offered some timely encouragement. Your highness has simply been neglecting her practice. Once her highness has mastered it, the emperor will surely never want to watch those impostor sword dances again. With my encouragement, the imperial consort worked harder and harder, until one day, she suddenly realized it when she woke up. I can't move my legs anymore. The imperial physicians from the Imperial Medical Academy came and went from the Wanchen Palace like a stream of people, each spending a long time examining the patient. In the end, their response was unanimous. Your Majesty, your current symptoms are beyond this humble servant's expertise. Please seek the advice of another physician. The imperial consort was so furious that she shouted, "You bunch of quacks." She didn't know that. In fact, any court physician could have diagnosed it. But no one dared to say it. Do you remember how the imperial consort sprained her ankle and dislocated a bone the first time she practiced dancing? Over the years, the misalignment has become increasingly severe, spreading from the ankles all the way up to the knees, and then to the pelvis, and pelvic misalignment affects fertility. The imperial consort is very likely to lose this pregnancy. What's more, if her pelvis is deformed, a miscarriage would make it almost impossible for her to conceive again in the future. No court physician dared to say such a thing. After all, everyone knows how desperately the imperial consort longs to bear an heir. And everyone knows just how cruel the consequences can be if she flies into a rage. By contrast, they would rather admit they couldn't cure this leg and be labeled quacks. The imperial consort's leg was hurting more and more, and the pain was making her feel worse and worse, so her hands began to rot even faster. At first, she tried to keep it a secret, but gradually, she could no longer hide it. Everyone knew that the imperial consort had contracted a strange illness. At first, the emperor felt sorry for her, and he visited her in the imperial consort's palace every day. But on the one hand, the imperial consort's beauty was fading day by day as she grew ill. She began losing her hair in clumps, and her fair skin grew increasingly sallow. On the other hand, the imperial consort was ill, and her physical discomfort made her emotionally volatile. She would throw tantrums and repeatedly remind the emperor of events from the past, even going so far as to say on several occasions, in moments of frustration, "Without this servant, Your Majesty would not be where you are today." In contrast, Consort Jiang was also carrying the imperial heir, and she was always gentle and serene. She never complained about her hardships, but only offered the emperor thoughtful words of comfort. As a result, the emperor spent less and less time with the imperial consort and instead spent the night with Consort Jiang. Time just flies by like that. Eventually, the imperial consort's infection had spread to her shoulder. The wound simply wouldn't heal. After applying the ointment, it would keep getting infected over and over again. So after a while, the palace maids were no longer willing to do this task. Only I was patient enough to apply the medicine to her over and over again. One spring day, when the grass was growing and the orioles were singing, I received a secret letter from Consort Jiang. She is already 7 months pregnant, and the court physician said the baby might be born early. I clutched the letter and looked at the emaciated consort on the bed. Well, then, the imperial consort must be about to give birth. That day, the emperor had just returned from court when he heard that 2 concubines had given birth at the same time. There aren't any major issues with Consort Jiang, but Consort Wei is ill, and her condition is quite serious. The emperor didn't hesitate. He went straight to Consort Wei's palace. The imperial consort curled up under the covers and began to cry. Your Majesty, we have truly been waiting for this child for a very, very long time. In fact, Consort Wei was truly the woman the emperor loved most deeply in his entire life. At that very moment, seeing her looking so haggard, with memories of the past flooding back, the emperor could not hold back his tears. Yen'er, give birth to the child with peace of mind. My vow still stands. I will make you empress and name our child crown prince. The emperor has left. The midwife and I stood together around Consort Wei. Consort Wei fainted several times. When she finally came to, she heard a baby crying. I happily told her, Your Highness, it's a prince. Consort Wei wept with joy. Meanwhile, bad news came from the princess's palace. The Empress Dowager gave birth to a stillborn child. This was perhaps the most prosperous period of Consort Wei's life. She gave birth to the emperor's only son and is about to be crowned empress. At that moment, just as the coronation ceremony was about to begin, I helped her wash and dress, carefully wrapping each festering wound with gauze. After wrapping it up, I walked over to the side and offered incense to a plain wooden plaque. The imperial consort was displeased. Lu Ying, what are you doing? Hurry up and help me put on my robe, I said to the young palace maid standing next to me. All of you, go out first. Consort Wei was about to be crowned empress, and as her attendant, I was also appointed palace mistress of the first rank, the highest-ranking female official in the inner palace, and enjoyed great prestige among the palace staff. The young palace maids didn't suspect a thing and all went out immediately. Once only Consort Wei and I were left in the room, I continued to offer the incense at a steady, unhurried pace. I'm 19 this year, big sis. From now on, I'll be older than you. After offering incense, I turned around and walked over to the imperial consort, helping her put on the ceremonial robes for her coronation as empress. One piece at a time. Your Highness must be very happy today. This is your last moment of happiness. After the coronation ceremony ended, I escorted the empress back to the palace. After the long ceremony, she was already very weak. The young prince was brought over by his wet nurse, shown to the empress for a moment, and then taken away again by his wet nurse. I helped Wei Yin'er lie down and massaged her legs. I said, when your highness is in a good mood, the wound on your hand doesn't fester as much, does it? So, your highness, you must stay cheerful. Wei Yin'er didn't pick up on the odd tone in my voice. She replied impatiently, I've just been crowned empress, how could I not be pleased? I smiled. Yes, your highness. Just try to stay in good spirits. But, your highness, do you remember how you injured this leg? Wei Yin'er grew increasingly impatient. Isn't it when you're doing the sword dance that you suddenly can't move? Lu Ying, why are you talking so much today? Do you want to get whipped again? I shook my head, looking serious. No, your highness injured this leg the first time she twisted it while practicing dance. Wei Yin'er froze. Actually, her highness's sprained ankle wasn't really an accident. After all, I was the one in charge of cleaning the dance studio at the time. All it took was a tiny bit of wax on the floor for her highness to easily slip and fall while spinning. But a sprained ankle isn't a big deal. If her highness had listened carefully to the imperial physician's advice back then and rested peacefully, she would have made a full recovery. Unfortunately, her highness soaked her feet in my bathwater and forced herself to dance. So the misalignment spread all the way down to my knees and then to my pelvis. Wei Yin'er suddenly shivered. She said, Lu Ying, you. I interrupted her. The pelvis is compressing the uterus. Your highness's child actually can't be saved. But I've served your highness for so many years, and I want to see you fulfill your heart's desire. So this servant did everything in her power to help her highness conceal the truth from the imperial physician, so that even though the fetal heartbeat had long since stopped, the physician was unable to detect it. Wei Yin'er's expression grew increasingly grim. A large pool of blood suddenly spread from the bandage wrapped around her arm. Oh dear, I said, pointing to the gauze. Your highness, you must stay in good spirits, or this wound will get infected. I continued speaking to myself. I know. Your Highness must be wondering. Since the fetal heartbeat stopped long ago, what's the story with the Crown Prince? With a malicious smile playing on the corners of my mouth, I looked at Wei Yan'er. Your Majesty. Haven't you noticed that the child's eyes, nose, and mouth all look quite like Consort Zhang's? Wei Yan'er suddenly lashed out. Lu Ying, you venomous woman. That's right. I've loved concocting poisons ever since I was born. When it comes to cruelty, who can compare to me? If my older sister had been there, she would have been my safety net. She would have used her kindness to cover up my wickedness, and I might have become a really good person. But my older sister is gone, and so I lost all my goodness. And all I wanted was to see my enemies torn to pieces. Yes, the babies were switched that night. I know the Emperor has feelings for you, and it's very likely he'll still make you Empress. So I had that child brought over to give him the title of legitimate heir. Consort Jiang was fully cooperative with this. After all, she had long been the subject of criticism because of her status as the child's biological mother. And this could very well affect the child's future. It would be better to let you take care of it since you're dead anyway. The child will be sent to her palace to be raised, and by then no one will mention you anymore. The child will still see her as the only mother. Well, what do you say? Your Majesty the Empress, you may indeed be of noble birth, but you and your family are all going to end up making a wedding dress for a child born to another woman. Wei Yan'er couldn't move anymore. Her wounds were festering in large patches, stretching from her shoulder to her chest and spreading all the way down to her neck. Wait a minute, if her vocal cords are damaged, she won't be able to speak. With her last ounce of strength, Wei Yan'er asked me hoarsely, these injuries, you're the one who poisoned me. Of course. I nodded coldly, but, I knew what she was going to ask. Wei Yan'er has been asking me to prepare medicine for her, but she always has the palace attendants taste it first. Why weren't there any problems with those palace attendants at all? I smiled. Because there really isn't any poison in those medicines. Your Highness, do you know where the poison was placed? Wei Yan'er stared at me with wide eyes. She couldn't have imagined it. I couldn't have imagined it even if I'd racked my brain. I burst out laughing, turned away, and took off my clothes. My back was covered with crisscrossing whip marks. Whenever she beat me, blood would often splatter onto her hands. That's why the rot started in her hands. Your Highness, the poison is in my blood. After my older sister's death, I returned to the capital and finally realized that the most potent poison in the world is a person's hatred. The vessel capable of refining the heart-piercing toxin is my own body. This poison is called piercing heart. The blood flows from the heart and throughout the entire body. The more your heart aches, the faster your body will rot. So, Your Highness, haven't I been reminding you all along? You really must stay cheerful. The next day, after returning from court, the Emperor came to visit the Empress. When I pulled back the blanket, I saw a body covered in blood and torn to pieces. The Emperor fainted on the spot and collapsed onto the couch. And just like that, Wei Yan'er's blood got on him. The danger of the heart-piercing toxin lies in the fact that it is essentially a goo. I am the one who controls the poison. I myself am not affected by it. But if someone I hate comes into contact with my blood, the poison will begin to take effect. Wei Yan'er got my blood on her. Now, the Emperor has once again been tainted by Wei Yan'er's blood. The lives of the several hundred members of the Song family can finally be settled. As I helped the Emperor, who had just regained consciousness, to his feet, I made a point of telling him, Your Majesty, you must stay in good spirits. After that, the Emperor never visited the Empress's palace again. All kinds of gifts and tokens of appreciation poured in like a stream, but the Emperor himself dared not cast another glance at that mangled, bloodied figure. The palace attendants also kept their distance. I was the only one who watched the Empress's body day after day, listening without complaint to her moans and watching the look of utter agony in her eyes as she glared at me. Finally, I told the Queen, actually, there is an antidote for the heart-piercing toxin. At that moment, the dying Empress's eyes shone brightly, as if in a final burst of vitality. I smiled. The only person in the world who knows how to make the antidote. Her name is Songji. She is a skilled doctor with a kind and compassionate heart. If she were still alive, she would surely be able to save the Empress's life. What a pity. I gently patted Wei Yanner's bloodied cheek and said regretfully, 6 years ago, Your Highness killed the only person who could have saved her. That night, Wei Yanner was completely ruined. By the time the young eunuchs carried her body out, all that remained was a skeleton. Everyone knows that the Empress died of a mysterious illness that could not be cured. The Emperor was deeply grieved, so his body began to rot as well. The Empress Dowager decided to entrust the young Crown Prince to Consort Jiang's care in her palace. Consort Jiang wanted to discuss our next steps with me. She was convinced that, having set up such a massive scheme, I must have extraordinary ambitions. But she realized I was gone. That palace maid named Lu Ying appeared in the palace just as suddenly as she had vanished. A year later, the emperor died after his entire body became covered in sores due to the same mysterious illness that had afflicted Empress Wei. The young crown prince, son of Empress Wei and currently raised by consort Jiang, ascended to the throne with the support of the Wei and Jiang families. And his rule is now secure. Consort Jiang thought I would stay in the palace, but that was never my intention. 7 years later, all I want to do is see the free-flowing mountains and rivers that I was just one step away from seeing. Of course, I'm also checking it out for my older sister. And just like that, I left the palace and became a traveling female physician. My medical skills aren't very good, probably only about 30% as good as my older sister's. But even if I only had 30% of my older sister's ability, I'd still be able to cure most of the illnesses in this world. For cases that are truly incurable, I'll suggest to the patient, how about I poison you? My poison is very effective. I will die without any pain. Some people are afraid of me, while others see me as a savior. So I continued practicing medicine as I traveled, and gradually made my way to the southwest. I ran into an elderly woman. When she was young, the old woman worked as a servant in the home of an official in the capital, and my older sister saved her life during the plague. When she saw the scar on my face, she rummaged through her drawers and found a prescription, saying it had been left behind by a renowned female physician in the capital named Song. The elderly woman imitated my older sister's tone at the time. My little sister is very pretty, but she's the naughtiest girl you'll ever meet. She's always messing around with cats and dogs. I think it's only a matter of time before she gets hurt. So I looked into this remedy ahead of time. It's the most effective way to get rid of scars. The old woman handed me the prescription. Although this prescription was formulated by Dr. Song for her younger sister, when she gave it to me, she said that if I encountered anyone else who needed help, I could also give them the prescription. The Song physician is the kindest person there is. She has always wanted to heal as many people as possible and bring benefit to the world. If she were to see a young woman as beautiful as you today, yet with a scar like that, she would surely give you this prescription. The old woman patted me on the shoulder and smiled gently. While in the palace, I was humiliated and severely beaten, yet I never once cried. But that day, holding the prescription my older sister had left behind, I burst into tears. I realized that maybe my older sister had never really left. She has always been there for me, in her own way. I followed the prescription my older sister left behind to get the medicine. A month later, the old scars on my face had disappeared, and my entire face was smooth and clear as new. I will travel the world again in this new form. That way, when I'm reunited with my older sister in heaven, I'll be able to tell her, I have seen all the free landscapes. And now, at last, I can be reunited with you.